Hey guys, so remember how I think the last time we were talking about this, I was like, yeah, I haven't read a romance novel in like 3 months and it's really crazy and wow. So I decided to read 3 romance novels in 3 days, in case you're wondering how my mental health has been. But this is going to work out for you because basically one of the actual reasons that this happened is because there are a lot of arcs that I have that are coming out on January 2nd. Like a lot, like way too many to possibly review one at a time or even get through in the month of January. I don't know why January 7th is such a big drop date, but when I was looking through this giant list of arcs that I got that are all coming out on January 7th, I realized that 3 of them have to do with rock stars and rock star romances. So I decided to read all of them and then put them into the same review because they're coming out on the same day, again, January 7th. These are all arcs from Edelweiss, so thank you to Edelweiss and the publisher for all of these copies. And there is definitely some that are better than others. So if you are also looking at like a list of romance releases and you want to read a rockstar romance, this is a video that says, hey, out of these 3 that happen to be coming out on January 7th, here's the one to skip. Here's the one that I have a lot of thoughts on. And here's the one that is super cute and solid. And that is indeed the order that we are going to talk about them because it is also the order that I read them, and we can talk a little bit about that process as well. So the first book that I want to talk about, and the first one of these that I read, is called The Lodge by Kayla Olson. I was quite excited for this book because last year or the year before, I reviewed Kayla Olson's book, The Reunion, which I quite enjoyed. That one was more of a Hollywood romance. In this one, our female main character is a ghostwriter, and she has been chosen to ghostwrite the biography of a very, very famous singer who used to be a frontman for a famous boy band. So think like One Direction. And except that what happened to this One Direction-esque band that used to be called True North, they had a falling out, the band, and then one of the other leaders of the band basically just up and disappeared. So basically imagine at the height of One Direction's fame, Harry Styles just decided to say nah, and then it's been like almost 10 years and he has not been heard from since. So there is a lot of buzz around this novel. And even for our female main character, who was in fact the last person to interview the said missing boy band member before he disappeared, she also has a lot of unanswered questions, as well as hoping that this book helps to make her career. She's having difficulty completing the book, and so the publisher decides to put her up in a Vermont ski lodge for an all-expenses paid writing retreat. While she is on this all-exclusive paid vacation, essentially, and trying to write the book, Alex, our ghostwriter, is trying to parse through the voice memos and deeply trying to get a hold of the singer whose novel she's trying to write. It's very difficult. He does not respond. He's traveling all over the world. And so while she's basically waiting for him to get back to her, even though they are on this extremely tight deadline, she decides to get back in touch with some things that she was doing during her childhood. She has a very complicated relationship with her family, and she starts to take skiing lessons. So she starts taking skiing lessons from a very hot ski instructor named Tyler, who is friends with the siblings that own the ski lodge in Vermont where she is staying, and they begin to kindle a relationship. And as things with Alex's family get more complicated and the story of the True North band gets more complicated, the relationship will also get more complicated as well. This book is like between 2 and 3 stars for me. It is cute, but as far as I'm concerned, seemed to be lacking in any real substance. There is supposedly a few twists in this book that seemed like very, very telegraphed to me. I saw them from before I even started the book, really. So I was like, yeah, this isn't really a surprise. This is kind of just what I expected. And while the book is cute, it was not really anything to write home about. And I had a lot of struggle with that. This whole thing was really disappointing because this was the first romance book that I had read in like 3 months. And so on the one hand, because it didn't have a lot of substance to it, it was easy to read, but it did leave me feeling like really underwhelmed. And originally, actually, I was going to just review this book and leave the other 2 books in this review for later. But after I got done with this book and I realized I honestly didn't have a lot to say about it because it was just pretty meh, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to stick it in somewhere because I really expected more from this book because I had liked a previous book by the author, but out of all 3 of these, you know, I don't think it would be necessarily a waste of your time, but there are way better books that I'm about to tell you about. So the next book that I read was called For One Night Only by Jessica James. This is the story of Valerie, or Val, and Caleb. Back in the day, about 10-ish years ago, both of these folks were in a band called Glitter Bats. Valerie was the lead singer and kind of like the front person. There was 3 other people who were in the band with them, and then Caleb helped Valerie write all of the songs and was also the bassist. However, the band fell apart when Valerie and Caleb's secret relationship fell apart. They were together, it wasn't known really to the world, it was basically talked about, there's fan fiction, like that whole thing. But they never really confirmed it, and the reason that the Glitter Bats broke up then is not really confirmed. This real story isn't told. A lot of people blame Valerie, and basically all of these 5 people who used to be really close friends break up and go their separate ways. Fast forward to the start of this book, Valerie is trying to save the musical TV show that she is on, but her dating life keeps hitting the headlines. She had broken up with a boyfriend a little while ago, but then got caught out in a club kissing a female castmate. Valerie is bi. It's just in the book. It's not like a big deal, which was a nice bit of bisexual representation. But her ex-boyfriend then goes on Instagram or whatever social media they're pretending is Instagram in the book and says, like, I can't believe Valerie did this, like, my heart is broken, basically trying to drum up positive press for himself at the expense of Valerie. And the studio is angry, Valerie is upset, and the studio is basically saying that since Valerie not only has drummed up all this bad press, but the female co-star that she was kissing, thinking that Valerie had kind of like used her to get in the middle of this other relationship she was in, basically like, I'm gonna leave the show, I have another opportunity. So the studio is upset, and they basically say, if you cannot clean up your image, we are going to cancel the show, you're going to be done, it's the whole thing. So the only thing Valerie can really think of to save her reputation is a Glitter Bats reunion, but that does mean getting Caleb back on board. The rest of the band, they're interested, but only if Caleb says yes, knowing that there was something between the 2 of them that happened, and a lot of them honestly having a lot of slow burned anger at Valerie as well for, again, thinking that she caused the breakup. So Valerie has to convince Caleb. Caleb has left fame completely. He is teaching music at a school and loves teaching, loves like working with students. But he's never really been able to say no to Valerie. So when she asks, he says yes. And cue 5 people with like a lot of buried anger and resentment that now have to like work on a very tight deadline to make this reunion concert go off without a hitch. Of course, along with the anger and resentment comes the unresolved feelings for Valerie and Caleb, and they are like 2 moths circling each other's flame, and yeah, some sparks will fly in multiple ways. I loved this book. It felt like a complete 180 from reading The Lodge. Like, from the beginning of this story, I was completely invested and interested in it. There are some weird things within this book, like the chapters, and there is dual POV, will go back and forth between Valerie and Caleb, and some of them are like interrupted with like a news article or a like Twitter, feel like the pretend, I think it's like Dewdrops is a social media network or something in there, like pretend social media posts and stuff like that. Outside of like maybe one of them, I really didn't quite understand the purpose of this, except to show that like Valerie's point of like, this is what really happened, and then here's how like the media is kind of twisting the story against her. But like, you kind of got that within the narrative as well, so I don't really know why those were there. But anyway, I loved Valerie and like her insecurities and trying so hard to like undo damage that she caused, but also not really understanding some of the consequences of her decision. And Caleb, who is very hurt, but also really loves music and is trying to figure out like a way to do something that he loves without it being at the expense of himself. And then their interactions with all the band members and what it says about fame and contracts and media, and like even the different ways that media reports things, you know, versus the guy's side versus the female side. And like, there was a lot going on here that I really loved. I was so attached to the characters. I could not put this book down. My partner was like, all right, it's like time to go to bed. And I'm just like sitting there like, but I have to finish this book. Because I had to know how it was gonna go, because I felt so invested and energized by the story. Unfortunately, you know, I'm not gonna spoil it, but the thing that like causes all the ruckus, you know, the 75% of the way through the book, fiasco really did not make sense to me. I felt like the character who caused it had both had a better understanding of why this was a bad thing, like legally and financially, and also had like been through a decent amount of character growth, where this decision would not have happened and just didn't make sense personally, professionally, legally, financially, and had to be something that they knew was a bad idea, and they did it anyway. And despite how like catastrophic that decision is, because it is like the 75% of the way through the book thing, it resolves really quickly, and not only from the romance perspective, but also again from the entire band's perspective. And again, there's 5 people in this band. So I felt really taken aback by that abrupt kind of like odd, uncharacteristic move after a book that had really attached me to the characters and the story. So I really, really want to recommend this book to people, and I would definitely read other things that Jessica James writes, but I am really kind of frustrated with how that turn went, because it just seemed wrong on a lot of levels. But I really, really loved the book, and I would still recommend it entirely over The Lodge, because at least it was more interesting and I was more invested in it. But it did have like a really weird ending, which is unfortunate. So the last book that I'm going to talk about, and indeed the last book that I read, is called Into the Woods by Jenny Holiday. This was really, really weird and kind of an out-of-body experience to read, because I have a fairly uncommon name. Particularly, I don't see Gretchen used a ton in like pop culture, movies, books, that type of thing. And so in this book, the female main character's name is Gretchen and the male main character's name is Teddy. And that was definitely weird and out of body, particularly in some of the sex scenes. That was really weird. I understand this is probably something that's like way more uncommon for other people, but it's not common for me. But anyway, the story opens up with Gretchen, who is approaching her 40th birthday, and she is trying to like figure out her midlife crisis, essentially. She has built her own business and built her own dance studio that is extremely successful, and she is currently working on expanding her dance studio and dance classes into a bigger venue. So she currently rents a place in a strip mall. She has bought a building. She wants to expand it to not only be the dancing, but also yoga and Pilates. And like, she's just like very overwhelmed by this step. She's not sure it was the right one. And also at the same time, she has decided to swear off dating. She's about to turn 40. She is very depressed with like the Tinder scene, the dating scene, and she is just like, I'm just gonna focus on me and like my business moving forward. But there's like a lot of things going on. She's very stressed. And a friend basically offers her as a substitute to teach at a summer arts camp. And so they had a dance teacher that was going to be there who had to bow out. And Gretchen decides that this basically like 2-3 week vacation in the woods is what she needs to just kind of like resettle her mind and get ready for this next phase of her life. Now, this is a summer arts camp, so it's not just dancers. There's also musicians. There is also like pottery and writers, like whole combo thing. So enter Teddy. Teddy was a part of a rock band called Concrete Temple, who has recently had an extremely messy breakup. And he is basically looking to run away to the woods at this camp to hide from the world and figure out his own next move. He wants to make a revenge album, a solo album, and needs time and a place to start that. And he thinks that like this camp will be the place to do that. He didn't read the fine print before he signed the contract, and he did not realize that he will be working with children. He's a very gruff 35, you know, like rocker guy, who of course has a sweet side, but it is definitely a shock to him, A, that he will be working with children, and then B, he meets Gretchen at the airport and he begins to call her Sugar Plum because she is just very excited. She has dyed hair, she's very happy, she's positive, and as far as he's concerned, he is just like, this is the worst possible personality for me right now. It rubs him the wrong way. So this is absolutely a grumpy sunshine, where the sunshine just kind of slowly pulls the little bit of happiness out of the grumpy. Because of course, as the summer camp goes on, Gretchen and Teddy grow closer, and there is quite a lot of like self-realization in this book. For a romance novel, they discuss a lot of things within their past and their families about growing up in poverty, having toxic parents, trying to grow up in a way that is like, you want to be successful, but also it's in spite of your parents and in spite of the way that you grew up, but also still having fears because of the like very traumatic way that you grew up that you can't get rid of, little tics and things. Teddy has a sister who is also dealing with her own mental health, and therapy comes up. It's like, for a very cute, sweet romance, like Grumpy Sunshine, you know, they get lost in the woods and you know, have to share a sleeping bag and all that type of thing. There's like also a lot of like really, really deep philosophical conversation that they have about some really heavy topics, and not in a way that makes the book heavy. I felt it was really intelligent and just really emotionally intelligent and very interesting to read, because Holiday just added that extra level to the characters and their backgrounds and the way that Gretchen and Teddy connect with each other. And so I really did not think that's what I was going to get when I started, and I'm just really impressed that it managed to like hold a really decent level throughout the book of like romance to you know, close personal discussion. Another thing that I loved about this book is that the thing that happens at 75% in, which for me can always be a make or break moment for a romance novel, like does not go, I think, like the way of a very traditional romance novel where like, you know, they have a fight, they break up, and they have to come back together. Like their story is so much more character relevant. Like this story progresses the way that makes sense and not in a way that just like conforms to romance tropes, which again was super awesome and lovely. And especially after reading The Lodge and then For One Night Only, where this has been a moment where the book kind of broke for me, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is such a great book. I love it. So again, while I would not say that you should or shouldn't read any of these books, I really feel like Into the Woods, even though it was not the one that I originally thought I was going to like the most, and I do feel like in certain ways I liked the characters more in For One Night Only, as a best complete book, Into the Woods has a lot of everything that I really appreciate in a romance novel, while still being very enjoyable. It wasn't a slog. And it just was also written very, very well as a romance novel. So, ranking my Rockstar romances, I would say that I would definitely recommend of these 3 Rockstar romances coming out on January 7th that you absolutely read Into the Woods by Jenny Holiday. It's very sweet, it's very cute. The summer camp thing adds that whole aspect of like nostalgia, even if you never went to summer camp, about like how you can make friends in strange places and create close friendships, and outside of the romance, plus all the other things I talk about. It's just like a really, really sweet and wonderful book that I really did not expect to be as good as it was. I want people to read for one night only, but I definitely have to put it below Into the Woods because of the last fourth of the book or so. The way that that ending goes just really threw off the whole thing for me, even though out of the 3 books, I think it's the one that I was most interested in the plot and the characters, because the writing just sent it in a really weird direction at the end. And then again, I don't think The Lodge is a terrible read. I think it's a fine way to spend some time if you need something that's like very simple, quick, and easy, but I wasn't invested in the characters. The story felt pretty bland and self-explanatory, and I didn't really feel one way or the other about it, honestly. I just kind of felt like, meh, that was a thing that I read. So if you need to pick and choose from these January 7th releases, Into the Woods is my choice. But of course, you can always try any of them for yourself from your local library if you want to just give them a try, and leave a comment down below after you have read them, one or many of them, and let me know what you think. Looking forward to reading more romance novels on time going into 2025. Thanks, guys. Bye.